did I? I didn't. Oh, sorry. I must have gone back in.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Graham. I'm one of the directors of the Richmond Vale Railway Preservation Society, and I bid you a welcome today. Unfortunately, we're in the lap of that man up there. So let's hope we can keep the showers away till all this is over. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Murrundi Light Horse Troop and the World War I reenactment group. There are a number of apologies. Firstly, the Governor-General. We tried twice to get the Governor-General to come here. Unfortunately, we missed out on both occasions. Tim Fisher sent his apologies. I believe Tim is not in the best of health. Having read his letter, indicated to me that Tim is having a lot of chemotherapy. I think he's not in the best of health, but he wished us all the best. Unfortunately, he said he could not be here, but he wished us all the best and praise for what work we are actually doing in preservation and conserving some of our history. Milton Morris, another of our local members. Milton was unfortunately unable to be here today. Warren Headley from South Maitland Railways. Andrew Morris from Transport Heritage. Transport Heritage has got a big function on down in Sydney this weekend, so unfortunately he couldn't be here, but he sent an able person to delegate for him here today anyway. That's all I can say, isn't it? Yeah, that's all. I'd now like to call on Graham Smith, another one of our directors, to introduce
Before I introduce some of the official guests, we will acknowledge country. We acknowledge the Wanneroo people as the traditional custodians of this land we are meeting on today, the elders past and present. We also acknowledge the Awabakal people to the east and the Darkinjung people to the south, and other Aboriginal peoples who now live within the Cessnock local government area. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Board of Directors to welcome the following official guests. The Mayor of Cessnock, Councillor Bob Pinson. Councillors Anthony Burke, Melanie Dagg, John Fagg and Darren Gray. Mrs Meryl Swanson, MP, the member for Patterson, and her staffer Josephine Hillard. And Mr Brian Andrews, the author of the definitive book on the history of J&A Brown's companies and their successors. We also welcome former Locomotive crew members, Bert Stoddart, Ron Hughes, Norman Brown, Glenn Bates, Neville Madge, Len Grant, Norm Perkis and Jack Richards. Please welcome those guests.
Thanks, Graham. I'd also like to add to that list our corporate sponsors, Coal and Allied, represented by Matt Holwell and Sharon Schilling. Port Waratah Coal Services, Sean Sears. He's here, thank you. You should be sitting there. And I'm waiting for a helicopter. Dick Smith rang me about 20 minutes ago wanting to know what it was like. He's on his way up from Sydney if he can get out of Terry Hills. So if we hear a chopper, that'll be Dick Smith. Jennifer Edmund from Transport Heritage. The other half, as I said, one half's in Sydney, and Jenny's duly been elected to deputise here today. Brian Andrews from the Edgeworth David Museum. Lynn Keeley from the University of Newcastle, along with her father Jack. Who else did I have? That's it. Right. They were on your side. Graham Black was instrumental in sort of getting this locomotive out of the bushes and starting it. So I wish Graham all the best for today. It's been his baby really. And to Graham and Wendy Black, welcome. I'd now like to call upon Peter Meadows, our chairman, if Peter would like to say a few words. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I won't go through the whole list again. Thank you. I'll just give you a short discussion on time with Graham. This society was officially incorporated in 1981. And when the council invited us out here to come to this site to build a railway. When we arrived, this site was overgrown, there were no rails, there was nothing here, all the buildings were dilapidated, and that was it, away you go, we've got a railway. But it took a long time. We did a lot of work off site because this railway was built using second-hand everything. We were invited as they were pulling up sidings all around Newcastle in those days. We were invited, if you want to come and do the work and pull the sidings up, you can have the track. Anything else you want while you're there. So we worked for many years just collecting stuff. Then eventually we started to lay rails. Initially, the first operation, right, we needed a locomotive. The engine that you see tilting around here, Marjorie, came from Lysart. It was on display at Edgeworth Miniature Railway. And the guys at Edgeworth, who also became members of this society, decided that it should be restored to working order. So it was sent here and over a period of time rebuilt. And as our initial running locomotive, it chopped up and down a short length of track here for a number of years, as slowly but surely we built the line up towards Pelham. It took us about 15 years, I think Brian could correct me on that, about 15 years to get to Pelham. Yeah. So, and that's at this stage where we travel to. It's 3.5 k's, we run up and down. But the whole thing to remember is this whole railway was built by volunteer labour. One year ago, a lot of the people who built it originally are no longer even with us. But we still strive to keep it going. I have a mission to make this whole site the historic precinct for the whole of the Lower Hunter. This is where people need to come to see how life was. We're trying to preserve our industrial and railway history. Right? Just a little bit on the RAD, not a lot. Right? It's sitting there, it's been cosmetically restored. And that's how it happened. There was an interest to restore it to full working order. It was assessed. The cost was worked out to be about $2 million. So that's a lot of money, and we were hoping to get government grants to do this. But in order to justify it, it had to be able to actually, preferably for the next couple of years, travel over the whole of the New South Wales system as a relic of the First World War. When it was realised the vehicle's design top speed was only about 65 k's an hour, and that's pushing it, there's no point, because it has to be able to do 80 to be allowed to travel on the main line. So nobody is going to spend $2 million just so we could shunt it up and down our railway. So instead, thank you to our sponsors. We've spent approximately $15,000 and restored it cosmetically. So that's where we're at the moment. So thank you everybody, and I'll hand you back to Graham. Thanks, Peter. I'd now like to call upon Graham Black. Graham would like to come forward. Graham has been instrumental in not only getting this up to it, but he's done an awful lot of research onto this locomotive, not only here in Australia but overseas, particularly in its wartime configuration. and I'll leave it to Graham to fill you in on that idea. Thank you, Graham.
Oh, thank you, Graham. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm only going to talk about the history of what is set up now. In the early stages of World War I, horses and motor trucks were used to transport equipment and supplies to the front line, but due to deteriorating conditions, as everyone knows, in France at the time, was not an idea. The Royal Engineers of the British Army come up with an idea to form the Railway Operating Division, known as ROD. You'll see that stamped on the tender. To help with that, to form the ROD, they sent out to all the colonies and asked for volunteers from the railways, all the colonies, to help man the ROD divisions. Now this railway, South Maitland Railway, and the railways, government railways, men from these railways here and went to France and worked on the engines. The first one of these engines was built and delivered to France July 1917, which is 100 years ago next month. There was 521 built. Only 306 went to France. The last one to go to France was ROD 2004. That's the last one that went to France for active service. After the ceasefire, all the equipment and everything had to be returned to England, and the last one to come back from France was ROD 2004. Now, for the last 5 months this engine was in France, the only Allied railwaymen there were the Australians. The English, the Americans, the Canadians and South Africans had all been sent back to England or sent home. Now, in 25 years of research, I haven't been able to prove it. I just wish that engine could talk to me. Circumstantial evidence says it was used by Australian railwaymen. I cannot prove it. So we have returned this engine. Graham will give you a history of it being used here on this railway and how it come to be here. But my aim was to restore this engine to its original World War I condition as a tribute to the men of all the railways in Australia that volunteered to serve in the Railway Operating Division of the Royal Engineers in the First World War. Lest we forget. Thank you.
I was going to play another CD, but I've jumped over, so I'll let that go for the moment. The London office of Jane A. Brown informed John Brown that 3 locomotives initially that had come back from Europe were available for tender. And John Brown said, beauty. He bought 3. He had them loaded on SS Burara and they were shipped out here to Australia. They landed in Sydney and then they were transferred to the Hexham workshop where they had their modifications done and then they were put into service. While they were on their way out here, John Brown was on his way back to London. He booked himself a passage and he was heading back to the office in London. And 10 more became available. John Brown instructed the office to purchase another 10. They were initially stripped down, loaded into crates, and loaded aboard his ship, the new steamer that he just bought, SS Minmai, to be ferried back out here to Australia. Now, John Brown was a bit of a smart fella. You can see a quid where he could save it. By stripping the engines down and loading them into boxes, he could use that as ballast, and therefore didn't have to pay tax. Tenders he couldn't strip down, so they had to come out as deck cargo. So obviously the cost to bring him out here was a little bit less. Over the next 3 years, it took to get the rest of them out here, all 10 locomotives out here, and then eventually to go to Hexham and be modified, rebuilt and placed on his railway. They were used extensively between Pelham and Hexham. The engine crews, some of you guys that are here today will remember them very, very well. They were a very simple engine. And the drivers and the firemen and the shunters and everybody else that was associated with it took a lot of pride in those engines. And some of the photographs that are on the wall up there will indicate they're almost as clean as that one sits up there today. And yet they operated backwards and forwards, day after day. As the years wore on and things changed, J&A Brown no longer became J&A Brown, was eventually absorbed by Coal and Allied. And today, Coal and Allied is still associated with it. By 1961, Pelham Colliery had closed. Richmond Main Colliery closed in 1967. So the railway line between Stockrington and Richmond and Pelham virtually became redundant. Locomotives were then only travelling between Stockrington and Exeter. 1973 was basically the last day that number 23 worked. And I say number 23 because, as we know now, it's number 2004. When the war situation is over, it will be referred back to its original running order, number 23. John Brown had 13 of them. They were originally known as the 12 to 24 class locomotives, but their wartime name stuck with them, and they just became simply, to the drivers and everyone else associated with it, ROD. And really, the ROD had nothing to do with the railway here, but it was just the terminology that stuck with the locomotives right through to today. So in June 1973, number 23 pushed 24 into the shed. It then pushed itself onto its own track, dropped its fire, and there it sat. And it sat there for a number of years, till there was a mining memorial trust that was established, and they wanted to put an establishment at Freeman's Waterhole. They wanted a locomotive, and so Coal and Allied was approached, and Coal and Allied very generously donated, I refer now to this locomotive as number 23, donated 23 to that organisation, along with some coal wagons, a brake van and a signal post. That operation stayed there till in the early 80s, where unfortunately it folded. Around about that time, this establishment was starting to come off the drawing boards, as they say, and a gentleman by the name of Mick Frame, councillor at the Cessnock Council at the time, was instrumental in talking to Coal and Allied and saying, well, look, you know, we've got to move it, how about we move it over here? So they did. They moved that, with wagons and everything else, over to here. In the early 90s, members long before me decided that we would put this thing back together. So we pulled it to pieces, and then for want of whatever, it died. So up until 2014, we've had a boiler sits up the back of the engine shed. We've had a tender and a frame that sat down underneath the gum tree. We've had bits and pieces of the locomotive in sheds, wherever it was just like a jigsaw puzzle. And when Graham decided that we wanted to bring it out, that was the case. Whoop, we've got to get this out and put it back together. In 2014, it was also mooted that because of the centenary of World War I, that they would get this locomotive operational again. And through Transport Heritage and some other corporate people, they looked at the possibility of getting this locomotive up and running again. Unfortunately, the stumbling block was a boiler and $2 million. And we were going to turn around and do one or the other, and so we continued on to put it to a static display. So then we ran into problem number one. Who owned it? We had paperwork to say that it was transferred from Freeman Waterholes to here. We had paperwork from Coal and Allied saying that they were transferring it to here. But no piece of paper to say that we own it, you own it, or nobody owns it. So then we had to unravel that. So I contacted Sharon Shillings at Coal and Allied. And Sharon Shillings is very much into the J&A Brown history and salvages anything she can before it's all lost, and passes that over to Lynn Keeley at the university. Set about trying to find out who the actual owner of it was. And so Thomas Holtz came on board. Thomas Holtz was instructed to find out So there was numerous phone calls, emails, reports, backwards and forwards between myself and Thomas. I even had to send a photograph and a report for Thomas to take to the boffins in Brisbane to even explain what a steam locomotive was. They had no idea, because we're talking to people that would not have even been born when that engine was running around here. So eventually, October 2015, I got a phone call from Sharon saying, you own it. So we were given a piece of paper saying that Coal and Allied, through their generosity, has now gifted ROD 23, along with 2 kitchens, which we found were also in the site here. We didn't know who owned them either. So along with the 2 kitchens, which one's directly behind you, so we now own those 3 locomotives. And through Sharon Shillings and Thomas, if that hadn't have happened, quite frankly, I think those 3 engines would have just simply been scrapped. To the volunteers who have spent countless hours scraping away 50 years of grime with wire brushes and scrapers and standing, doing whatever, with paint brushes and litres and litres and litres of black paint, undercoat and everything else to paint the old girl to look like it is. I, on behalf of the board, say thank you very much. It's been a magnificent job. It's been a long job. And you consider some of you only work here Fridays and Saturdays, but I know 2 gentlemen in particular have been out here, I think they live here. So, our corporate sponsors, Coal and Allied, of course, was the major sponsor in helping not only to give us the locomotive in the first place, but through their grants people, with Matt Holwell, Sharon, Port Waratah Coal Services, and of course Dick Smith. They were the ones that sort of put the money in to get it to where it is today. And without them, we wouldn't be celebrating 100 years of history. It would probably still be laying in the paddock. So again, on behalf of the board, I thank you people very, very much. The volunteers who turned this engine from a rusting relic from bygone years to a shining example of a 100-year-old locomotive, you can feel proud. That's your business. You blokes did that. And every day that you walk in here now, you look at that and you think, I had something to do with that. Let's hope the old girl will still be standing here in another 100 years' time. I'd like to call upon Peter Meadows now, if he would call upon Sharon Shillings and Matt Hollywell to unveil a plaque commemorating the gift of the locomotives to Richmond Vale Railway Preservation Society.
All right. Sharon, Matt, would you like to
get out of it, that is.
All right. All right. It just lift back in. Yeah.
Say a few words on behalf of the company?
Yeah, certainly. Firstly, I can assure you I'm not one of the Brisbane boffins. So one of the local managers and very proud, especially for what this place represents for Coal and Allied. I think, correct me if I'm wrong here as a historian, but I think we're up for our 175th anniversary in 2019. So this place is a big part of that, and I got a dig in the ribs from my wife last night about 1:30 in the morning because I was still reading the old Coal Masters book from the 150th birthday. And Graham covered a lot of the military history, but I was amazed to read that Rod 21 actually led one of the Field Marshal's teams to Versailles in 1918 to actually sign the treaty. So when you think about the history, it's quite amazing. And I'd be looking forward to getting the team's help when I get to 99, because I hope to look that good. That is a seriously lot of credit to the team for getting the locomotive back looking like it's past days. It was quite painful to chase down the paperwork. Guess that's legacy of big bureaucracies these days, but the decision was quite easy. And got fans everywhere. It's the decision was quite easy because this is its home, this is where it did its work, and this is where it belongs. So, congratulations to the team on the restoration, and I guess thank you because it'll be around now for many years to come for many future generations to enjoy.
I'd also like to ask Matt Sears if he would like to come. Sean Sears, if you'd come forward and we acknowledge your contribution from Port Waratah culture.
Thank you, Matt. Our contribution isn't as significant as Coal and Allied, but nonetheless it's a pretty privileged one. What occurs to me is we've been exporting coal out of Newcastle now for more than 200 years. Sometimes people lose sight of that. Back in the late 1800s we started exporting coal, so it's approaching now 240 years. And if you look at these locomotives and some of the infrastructure here, that's at least part of our history. And I think our history is really important. It's important for the next generation. So my son Mitchell is here with me. He's 12 years old, but he's coming along to look at some of our history, and hopefully he'll learn from that and be able to apply that in the future. So we're privileged and pleased to be part of this event today and part of the sponsorship. The loco looks excellent. I look forward to having a ride on one of these ones again today. But thank you. Thank you, Graham and team.
Sure. I can't call upon Dick Smith because I still haven't heard the chocolate. We, up until Thursday afternoon, we were still chasing around as to the configuration of the plaque. Graham Smith came up with an idea, Sharon came up with an idea, and we coupled the two together. Admittedly, at the moment, it's in that sort of configuration, or the one that Graham's got. But Coal and Allied have very generously donated again a brass plaque that will incorporate what it was. It won't be getting hung on the locomotive, that'll be hung up in a building somewhere. So again, Coal and Allied. But the thing is, Coal and Allied have got to have this done by the end of June, because they ain't going to be Coal and Allied anymore. Now, as I said earlier on, volunteers put an awful lot of work into this. But there's three particular people that have actually stood out. Graham Black, who did the research on it, who led the restoration team, has been instrumental from day one in wanting to get this thing back on public vision so that our younger generation can see it. We won't be here in probably another 10 or 15, 20 years' time, but we want the younger generation to remember, what it was all about. So I'd like to ask Graham if he'd come forward, please. And I'll ask Peter if he would present Graham with a certificate.
Right. Peter, just before we start, Peter and I go back 65 years.
1954.
54, when we first started playing trains together. And, how would you say, all of our life we're still doing it.
We're still doing it. So, anyway, Brian, thank you for all the effort you've put into this project. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. Yep.
When you take the photo again, can you push that button?
I've got everything up.
It's all right, I'm still used to the little box.
The cars, the trees, the cans.
Then you go home and crop it. There's been two other gentlemen that figuratively, literally spent their life here. They were out here day after day after day. They either sat, stood, they scraped, they rubbed, they painted, they did everything. Unfortunately, one gentleman is an apology today because he's at work, but the other gentleman is here, and if he can sort of walk this far, because he's not only done a shoulder, an elbow, a knee, a hip, I think he's almost got to be rebuilt. And I'm not sure whether that's all to do with what he was doing up there, but I call upon Will. If Will, you'd come forward please and receive
You've been a great help. A great help.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. You and your brother Peter. Please accept these certificates. We will very appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Go to your bed. Yeah, hang it over there. Just.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that just about brings us to a close.
Get on the train.
One thing I would like to mention, that Graham Black was instrumental in getting a book printed on the history of the ROD N23 or the whatever. You can see Graham or through the souvenir shop. There was also a video made by one of the Zip Matt?
Len Grant.
There was a video made that actually recorded the locomotive working between here and Hexham and back, and we've now got that for sale. Where's Len? Over there. Yeah. So yeah, see Graham or through the souvenir shop. Proceeds go to the restoration of the locomotive up there.
The restoration to return it to steam,
Yeah.
not just sitting there.
I guess by the time we get round to putting it to steam, it'll be a lot more than $2 million.
Like you say, Kate.
On inflation. Okay, that just about brings us to a close. I now would like to ask the official people to join us for a morning tea over in the Mining Museum building. I particularly want to mention the old drivers that are here. The drivers, the firemen, the shunters, whatever part of the organisation you blokes played. I know when I spoke to one bloke on the phone one night, I thought I was going to be there for a lifetime, because once he started, I didn't think he was going to ever stop. And when I said I'm going to talk to so-and-so, all of a sudden all these old blokes have suddenly got together. So I reckon there's going to be some stories told over there before the day's out. Hope someone's got some way of recording all these sort of stories. But anyway, on behalf of Richmond Vale Railway Preservation Society, thank you for turning up today. Thank you to the Light Horse. Thank you to the World War I reenactors. And in actual fact, if you go into the museum building, there is a beautiful display of World War memorabilia. Thanks to Greg Ingles. It's a beautiful display in there. He's even put the flags out the front. We've got all three. We've got the Union Jack, the French and the Belgian flag. So we're really war proud. So thank you very much for attending. I'm glad the shower held off for this length of time. Normal train service will resume for those, but for our official people, if you would just like to either make our way over, but I'd like to at some stage get all the official people in front of the locomotive and get a series of photographs if we may. Peter, did you have any further to say?
No, just thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.